1. Riches begin in the mind before they arrive in the bank. Before I ever held wealth in my hands, I had to confront the battlefield in my mind. I was raised in a world where the mention of wealth came with suspicion, where money was either idolized or demonized, but never understood. I watched people pray for breakthroughs while refusing to break their beliefs. I saw entire families enslaved not by the lack of money, but by the abundance of limiting thoughts. I used to believe money was for the lucky, the privileged, the born rich. That belief, invisible as it was, weighed heavier than any chain around my neck. And then came the moment of awareness, the precise moment I understood that wealth is not first earned with labor, but with thought. My financial breakthrough didn't begin when I got a new job. It didn't start when I read a book on investments. It began the day I caught myself speaking words of lack and replaced them with words of purpose. I used to say, I can't afford that. I switched it to, how can I create the means to afford that? One question invited solutions, the other shut the door. The mind is the workshop of wealth. It is the vault where ideas are minted, polished, and transformed into gold. When I realized that my thoughts were my first form of capital, everything changed. Poverty was not just a condition of my bank account. It was a virus in my beliefs. I had inherited mindsets from others, friends who laughed at ambition, relatives who mocked dreams, teachers who emphasized survival over success. But I made a decision to unsubscribe from their programming and install new thoughts, empowering, bold, unapologetic. Visualization became my morning ritual. I didn't just hope for money. I envisioned myself handling it, multiplying it, giving it, respecting it. I created mental movies of transactions where I delivered immense value, and wealth flowed back to me as a reward. That wasn't fantasy. That was the birth of belief. My thoughts sculpted my reality like a master craftsman working on marble. I wasn't waiting for the world to give me wealth. I was becoming the person who could receive it. Belief is the seed and desire is the water. When I merged the two, action followed. Suddenly, I was working not with desperation, but with expectation. I didn't clock in with dread. I worked with purpose because I knew my output had a destination. My thoughts became aligned with my actions. I was no longer a prisoner of doubt. I became the architect of a future I had already built in my imagination. People often say, "I'll believe it when I see it." But wealth taught me the opposite. I had to see it in my mind before I could ever believe it in my hands. The inner world controls the outer world. When I learned to think rich, speak rich, and expect rich, I started attracting the conditions that allowed me to live rich. I stopped laughing at mindset coaches and started listening. I stopped ridiculing affirmations and started creating my own. Every day, I repeated lines that reprogrammed my subconscious. Money comes to me in increasing quantities through multiple sources on a continuous basis. I didn't whisper these words, I declared them, and every time I said them, I chipped away at the false beliefs embedded in my soul like rust on old iron. As my mind shifted, so did my choices. I stopped seeing problems, I started seeing opportunities. I didn't panic during setbacks. I examined them like puzzles because my mind was trained to extract lessons, not surrender to discouragement. I didn't envy the wealthy. I studied them. I saw patterns. They didn't talk like everyone else. They didn't think like everyone else. And that difference wasn't arrogance. It was clarity. They had learned the truth. If your mind rejects wealth, your reality will never hold it. Gratitude became another weapon. Not the fluffy kind, but the strategic kind. I was grateful not just for what I had, but for what I expected. Gratitude wasn't just appreciation. It was confirmation. I thanked the universe, thanked the Creator, thanked myself for every lesson, every setback, every small win, because I understood that the frequency of wealth is tuned through gratitude. Scarcity cannot live in a grateful heart. As the days passed, I noticed a new emotion inside me, calm, not arrogance, not naive optimism. just calm certainty. I knew wealth was no longer a maybe, it was a must. I didn't hope to be rich, I expected it. And because I expected it, I prepared for it. I studied finance. I read balance sheets. I learned to track money down to the cent, because belief without preparation is delusion. I wasn't waiting for a miracle. I was building the foundation for the inevitable. My thoughts birthed strategy. My belief birthed discipline, and the old me, the version of myself that used to flinch at bills, panic at expenses, and shy away from opportunity, was slowly buried under the stronger version rising within. The version that thought boldly, planned carefully, acted decisively. That was the version who became wealthy in thought before becoming wealthy in wallet. 2. Money is a servant, never a master. I used to be ruled by money like a desperate subject under a cruel king. My mood was determined by the number in my account. When I had it, I felt powerful. When I didn't, I felt worthless. I let money bully me, define me, and decide what kind of day I would have. That was slavery disguised as survival. I was not living, I was reacting. Money snapped its fingers, and I jumped. It whispered fear, and I obeyed. Then I learned the law: money is a tool, not a tyrant, a servant, not a master. And when I reversed the roles, my life flipped. I realized that money amplifies what already exists. If you're wise, money multiplies your wisdom. If you're foolish, money magnifies your chaos. Money has no morality. It simply responds to the hand that holds it. And I decided that my hand would be strong, steady, and intentional. I stopped chasing money with desperation and started commanding it with purpose. I stopped seeing it as oxygen and started seeing it as leverage. That was the day I regained my power, because the one who controls the tool writes the story, and I was tired of letting a neutral object dominate my narrative. Discipline became my weapon of choice. I refused to worship a paycheck. I stopped celebrating payday like a holiday and started celebrating strategy like a lifestyle. I didn't wait for money to come. I set goals, I assigned roles, I gave orders. Every dollar had a task. Every expense had to prove its worth. I was no longer spending. I was deploying. And the difference between the two is the difference between poverty and power. I watched how others bowed to money, how they sold their time, their energy, their integrity for temporary comfort. I had done it too, but then I chose freedom, real freedom, the kind that comes not from having more, but from needing less. The kind that comes when your values are higher than your income. I no longer looked at things and asked, can I afford this? I asked, does this serve my mission? If it didn't, it was denied, not because I couldn't buy it, but because I wouldn't be mastered by it. I built systems, automations, investments. I read about how money works in silence, how it grows in compounding cycles, how it multiplies when given structure. I treated money like a soldier in my army. I didn't keep it in the barracks. I sent it to battle. Stocks, real estate, business tools, education. Everything I spent on had to earn its keep. Every dollar was a worker. Every cent had to justify its existence. As my mindset evolved, I began to see the truth. Money doesn't change people. It reveals them, and it had revealed me. The insecure version of me who chased validation through possessions, who bought to impress, who spent to escape. But that version died. The new version understood that money serves best when it's told what to do, not when it's worshipped blindly. I stopped fearing bills. I saw them as proof that I was playing the game of life. I stopped fearing taxes. I learned how the wealthy navigate them. I stopped envying others. I studied them. My financial emotions were no longer chaotic. They were calm, calculated, and composed. Because the moment you stop serving money and make it serve you, anxiety leaves and strategy enters. Money became quiet in my life, not absent, quiet, because when a servant knows its job, it doesn't need to scream, it obeys, and mine obeyed because I had earned the right to command it, not through entitlement, but through education and effort. I studied the patterns of those who mastered money. They weren't louder, they were smarter. They didn't move impulsively, they moved intentionally. That became my model, that became my new normal. And as I trained money to serve, it began opening doors I didn't even know existed. 3. Every dollar must have a direction. There was a time when money entered my hands like water, flowing into a sieve. It came and it went, faster than I could count it. I blamed the income, I blamed the bills, I blamed the economy, but the truth stared at me through the fog of excuses. I had no command, I had no direction. I was the captain of a ship with no map, watching the tides of expenses take me wherever they pleased. Then came the revelation: money without direction will always vanish. A dollar with no assignment becomes a servant to distractions. I realized I wasn't broke, I was undisciplined. I didn't need more income. I needed more intention. I didn't need a miracle. I needed a method, so I created one. I sat down with pen and paper, and I gave every dollar a job, a purpose, a plan. I became ruthless with clarity. If the dollar didn't belong to my goals, it didn't belong in my hands. People called it budgeting, but that word never lit a fire in my soul, so I called it commanding. I was a general, and every dollar was a soldier. I deployed them to investments, education, growth, and service. No more random purchases, no more emotional spending. I gave money its orders, and in return, money gave me peace. There is a kind of freedom that comes not from abundance, but from control. The man who directs his resources is wealthier than the man who chases them blindly. Impulse was my enemy. It whispered, "You deserve it." When my goals required sacrifice, it said, "It's just a little." When I was building a mountain from pennies, I had to slay the demon of impulse. I had to replace it with a higher voice, a voice that said, "What does this cost you in the long run?" Because every unplanned dollar stolen by pleasure was a soldier removed from the front line of my legacy. I set boundaries, I set priorities. I knew what I wanted: freedom, peace, generational impact, and I knew what it would cost: discipline, delay, discomfort. So I paid the price. While others bought what impressed others, I invested in what would empower me. While others laughed at frugality, I rejoiced in control, because I knew that direction today creates acceleration tomorrow. Cash flow is not just about income, it's about flow. Where does it go? How fast does it leave? What purpose does it serve? Most people never ask these questions. They let money wander like a stray animal, and then they cry when it's gone. Not me. I became a master of the flow. I tracked every cent. I labeled every category. I reviewed every statement. I knew my numbers like a warrior knows his weapons, and something miraculous happened. The moment I showed money that I could be trusted, more of it came. The moment I stopped wasting the little, the bigger amounts found their way to me. It was as if money had a consciousness of its own, looking for a worthy steward. I became that steward, not through luck, but through structure. Not through greed, but through intention. I didn't hoard it. I honored it. I didn't worship it. I wielded it. I didn't fear losing it. I feared misusing it, because money, like time, doesn't wait for the unprepared. It flows to the focused. It obeys the organized. It elevates the excellent. The man who refuses to direct his dollars will forever be at the mercy of those who do. I began dividing my money into missions. One portion for investing to build the future. One portion for saving to protect against storms. One portion for giving to stay humble and grateful. One portion for learning, because the more I grew, the more I earned. And yes, one portion for living, because discipline without reward becomes bitterness. But every dollar had a mission. There was no wasteland in my finances, only battlegrounds with strategy. I taught my dollars to multiply. I tracked return, I monitored growth. I didn't just spend. I built. I didn't just earn. I engineered, and over time my direction turned into momentum. My momentum turned into mastery, and I understood that the path to wealth is not paved with chance. It is paved with choices. Small, consistent, intentional choices made day after day until they compound into freedom. 4. Passive income is freedom's engine. The moment I learned that trading time for money had a ceiling, I felt the limits closing in like invisible walls. I could only work so many hours, I could only raise my rates so high, my body had limits, my energy had boundaries, my days had a cap, and no matter how hard I worked, the truth was simple. I was building someone else's dream while postponing my own. I wasn't free, I was functional. There's a difference, but then I heard a truth that cut deep and clean. If your money stops when you stop, you're not free. You're just surviving, and survival is not success. Survival is servitude dressed in modern clothes. I looked around and saw people chained to jobs they hated, praying for weekends, dreading Mondays, saving pennies for retirement they may never reach. I saw dreams decaying behind desks, potential rotting in office chairs, creativity silenced by the need to just pay the bills. I knew I couldn't be one of them, so I made a vow to build income that didn't need me. Income that breathed on its own, that multiplied in my sleep, that whispered freedom every time it arrived. I didn't want more work, I wanted more options, and passive income was the bridge, but that bridge didn't build itself. It required strategy, it required patience, it required vision. I started small, I didn't wait for perfect conditions. I started with what I had, a small investment here, a rental idea there, a digital product, a dividend, paying stock, a system that earned while I lived. I studied every model. I learned the language of money, cash flow, equity, compound interest, royalties. I spoke it fluently until it became second nature, because what you understand you can multiply. What you ignore you will lose. It wasn't overnight, it wasn't glamorous, it didn't make headlines, but it was mine. Brick by brick, dollar by dollar, I built income streams that didn't clock out. Income that worked while I worked on myself. Income that never called in sick. Income that smiled while I slept. And with every dollar earned passively, my confidence grew, not because of the amount, but because of what it represented, ownership. Leverage, vision. The wealthy understand this secret. They don't sell their time. They scale their impact. They don't fear automation. They embrace it. They don't chase labor. They create legacy, and I wanted to be one of them. Not to flaunt wealth, but to claim time, because time is the one resource no one can buy, unless they own the systems that make money independent of it. So I created those systems, automated funnels, licensable content, dividend portfolios, scalable offers. I didn't do it all at once. I built it while the world slept. Early mornings, late nights, silent hours of building what others ignored. While most were watching entertainment, I was building escape plans. While others mocked the idea of money while you sleep, I was already collecting the interest. And what I discovered changed everything. Passive income isn't just money, it's mental clarity, it's peace of mind. It's the silence of no alarm clock, the power of choice, the ability to say no without panic. It's walking away from toxic environments, turning down soul, sucking jobs, and choosing your time based on purpose, not payment. Passive income became my protector. It guarded my creativity, it funded my mission, it allowed me to give without guilt, to rest without fear, to plan without pressure. The more I built it, the more I felt alive. Because I was no longer trapped in the equation of time equals money. I had exited the rat race, not because I won the lottery, but because I learned the rules. It's not about laziness, it's about leverage. The lazy chase easy money. The wise build engines that work harder than they ever could. The lazy chase shortcuts. The wise build systems, and those systems, though hard to build, pay dividends in time, peace, and power. While the world trades hours for survival, I trade value for freedom. Passive income doesn't mean zero work, it means smart work up front. It means delayed gratification. It means long nights of building pipelines that don't leak. It means investing now to rest later, and when it's built, it whispers possibilities no employer could offer. It opens doors no resume can unlock. It grants exits from lives that feel like cages. It creates space for purpose, for passion, for peace. It becomes the engine of everything worth building, because when your money works for you, you finally begin to work for what matters most in life, not for mere survival, but for impact, fulfillment, and complete financial command over your future. 5. Never spend like you're rich until your money works harder than you do. There is a dangerous illusion that parades itself as success, the urge to look wealthy before you've earned the right to be free. I once believed that dressing the part, driving the part, and spending like the part would somehow transform me into the person I was pretending to be. But there's a difference between image and reality. One is maintained by debt, the other is sustained by discipline, and I learned the hard way that if your spending habits are designed to impress others, your future is already for sale. I remember the first time I bought something just to feel significant. It was a watch, not just any watch, but the one they said successful men wear. It cost more than my rent. I put it on, and for a fleeting moment I felt powerful. But when the novelty wore off, all I had was a receipt and a heavy reminder of my insecurity. I had mistaken luxury for identity. That was not wealth, that was weakness wearing a price tag. Real wealth doesn't scream. It doesn't need logos, flashy debt-fueled purchases, or external applause. It is silent. It is calm. It is structured. The moment I stopped spending like I was rich and started investing like I was serious, my bank account transformed from a sieve to a reservoir. I understood that every dollar spent prematurely on image was a dollar stolen from investment. From growth, from legacy, spending is easy. Anyone can do it. It takes no intelligence to buy things, but it takes wisdom to restrain yourself when you have the means to act on impulse. That wisdom is what separates those who merely earn from those who build. If you want to test your financial character, don't look at how you behave when you're broke. Look at how you behave when you have extra. Will you multiply it, or flaunt it? Will you use it to buy freedom, or try to rent attention? I chose to delay gratification. I drove the same old car while stacking assets. I wore simplicity while building complexity behind the scenes. I ate at home while others partied away their future, and the world called me boring. They called me cheap, but I was planting seeds while they were burning fields. Years later, they saw the harvest, and I saw their regret, because true wealth is patient. It doesn't chase applause, it chases outcomes. Before I ever upgraded my lifestyle, I made sure my income streams were working without my hands. Before I ever bought a luxury item, I ensured I had multiple flows covering the basics, the extras, and the future. If I wanted something, I asked myself, can my passive income pay for this without touching my foundation? If the answer was no, I didn't buy it, not because I couldn't afford it, but because I refused to gamble with freedom. The rich don't look rich for a reason. They don't need to. Their money is working silently in the background, earning while they rest, compounding while they focus. It's the wannabes who scream the loudest, hoping that borrowed appearance can cover their empty balance sheets. I didn't want to be one of them. I didn't want to win the short game and lose the life game. I trained myself to think like an investor, not a consumer, to see purchases not as trophies, but as tests. I asked, will this make me more valuable or less? Does this add to my assets or subtract from them? Will this matter in 5 years or only for 5 minutes? These questions became shields, guards against foolish choices. Because every unnecessary purchase delays your dream. Every impulse that wins robs your future of its strength. So I stayed invisible when others sought attention. I stayed hungry when others satisfied temporary cravings. And eventually my money began working harder than I did. It earned interest, it paid dividends, it grew businesses, and when your money becomes your employee, you no longer have to sell hours. You begin to buy time. But it doesn't start with earnings. It starts with how you treat the earnings you already have. Do you consume them, or command them? Do you honor them, or waste them? Because the habits you form at every level follow you to the next. If you overspend at $1, 0, a month, you'll overspend at $10, 0. And if you lack restraint at $10K, you'll mismanage $1, 100K. Money doesn't change your habits. It magnifies them. I had to kill the desire to impress. I had to abandon the addiction to approval. Because no car, no suit, no gadget, no vacation will ever fill the void created by the absence of purpose. And no purchase ever brought me peace like the knowledge that my money was producing more money, even while I slept. That's the real flex, not the purchase, but the power, not the item, but the independence, not the image, but the infrastructure. The moment you stop spending to look rich and start building to become free, your life enters a different dimension. Your decisions become sharper, your confidence becomes unshakable, and you stop caring who notices your watch, because you own your time, and time, once bought back, is the greatest luxury any human can ever possess. 6. Your income will never exceed your personal development. Money doesn't come to who wants it. It comes to who is worthy of it. That was the hardest truth I had to accept when I hit my first ceiling. I was working long hours, grinding every day, burning out with nothing to show. I thought hustle was the answer. But hustle without internal growth is a treadmill. You sweat, you move, but you don't go anywhere. My income had flatlined not because the world was unfair, but because I hadn't grown into the person capable of attracting more. It was a brutal wake-up call. I wasn't being underpaid. I was underdeveloped. I hadn't invested in new skills. I hadn't expanded my mindset. I was trying to carry new levels of wealth with an old version of myself. And wealth doesn't respect laziness, especially not intellectual laziness, so I made a vow to outgrow every problem, to outlearn every obstacle, to outthink every limitation. My income would only rise if I did. So I buried myself in books. I listened to thinkers, I shadowed mentors, I took courses, I paid for proximity, I understood that knowledge is currency, perspective is power, wisdom is leverage, and every time I stretched my thinking, opportunities that were invisible before became obvious. I started seeing patterns where others saw chaos. I found solutions while others complained, and slowly the world opened up to me, not because it changed, but because I did. Personal development became non-negotiable. I set goals not just for income, but for intellect. I didn't just track financial KPIs. I tracked my mental progress. Was I better than last month? Did I upgrade my environment? Did I challenge my beliefs? Because wealth will never stay in the hands of someone mentally unprepared. It will find its way back to those who have built the mind to sustain it. I learned that the greatest investment I'd ever make wasn't in stocks, real estate, or crypto. It was in me. My mindset, my leadership, my communication, my strategy. Because when you increase your value, the marketplace pays attention. When you solve bigger problems, you earn bigger rewards. And when you transform yourself, your income transforms with you. No one is underpaid forever. They're just underprepared. When you grow enough, money finds you, not by accident, but by alignment, because value always attracts compensation. The world may ignore your effort, but it can never ignore your evolution. Growth becomes undeniable, and when you become someone of rare mindset, skill, and presence, wealth no longer becomes a wish. It becomes a natural consequence, so I made self-education a daily discipline. I didn't wait for the system to teach me. I became my own university. Every morning I fed my mind. Every evening I reviewed what I learned. I studied psychology to understand people. I studied economics to understand money. I studied leadership to multiply teams. I studied spirituality to keep my ego in check, because all these areas were connected. Success is never one dimensional, and I practiced what I learned. I didn't just read, I applied. I didn't just highlight, I executed. Every new insight went into action. I became a practitioner of personal power. I stopped being impressed with information and started being obsessed with implementation. That shift made the difference, because growth without action is illusion. It's comfort disguised as progress. Eventually, people noticed, not because I shouted, but because I shined. I spoke differently. I moved differently. I handled pressure better. I attracted leaders. I repelled mediocrity. And I realized something that would guide me forever. Your income is a mirror. It reflects who you are. Your habits, your hunger, your humility. And that mirror will never lie, so I kept growing, kept sharpening, kept leveling up. I didn't wait for motivation. I built discipline. I didn't hope to be discovered. I became undeniable. Because when you become too valuable to be ignored, the doors you once begged to be opened now swing for you automatically. Not because the door changed, but because you outgrew the need to knock. You became the door. And when you become the door, money doesn't just follow you, opportunities chase you down with urgency, because you've earned the right to command them by becoming the kind of person worthy of receiving everything you've prepared for through the furnace of personal development. The lessons shared weren't just about money. They were about mastery, mindset, and meaning. Each principle transformed not only my bank account, but my identity. I learned that wealth isn't an accident. It's a deliberate result of discipline, delayed gratification, and relentless self-growth. From respecting every dollar to elevating my thinking, each step pushed me closer to freedom. True success isn't about how much you earn, it's about who you become in the process. When you build the character that wealth respects, the rewards follow naturally. Change your habits, sharpen your mind, and wealth will no longer be a chase. It will be a consequence.